Hello, everybody. This is Mike Harrigan. I'm here again with you for another weekly edition of Brain Buzz with Mike. I hope everyone's having an awesome week. I want to thank everyone for joining me here, and let's get right into it. The topic for today is going to be the benefits of simultaneous physical and cognitive training. Okay? So what are the benefits of doing training, physical and cognitive training, at the same time? Well, there have been many studies, and I think everybody is well aware of the fact that physical training is very good for the brain, as is cognitive training. That's well documented. But what is less known and what is really becoming much more studied, and the evidence is coming in much more strongly, is that training simultaneously actually has a greater benefit than just doing the physical and cognitive training separately. So I'm going to reference a couple of different scholarly articles that kind of make this point. So the first one is a peer-reviewed article that was published in August of 2015, and you can find it at the National Library of Medicine at NIH. And so let's dig into that one. That one, the method they used was to compare physical and cognitive training done simultaneously to just doing physical training. Okay, so they're comparing physical training with physical training that is coupled with cognitive training at the same time. They did this study on seniors over the age of 70 that did not have cognitive impairment. So these were people who were not cognitively impaired, and they were randomly assigned to three different groups. The first two groups did various types of physical exercises coupled with cognitive challenges. So the first one did a form of dancing coupled with attention-demanding cognitive tasks. And then the second one did treadmill walking coupled with coupled with some verbal memory training. And then the third group just did treadmill walking. So they were the reference group, and they just did straight up physical training with no cognitive load. All right. All three groups did training for 1 hour at a time for 6 months. Okay. They did 2 1-hour sessions per week for 6 months. All right. Now, they tested people for cognitive performance before they started the training. And then they did it again after 3 months, 3 months after the final training, 6 months after the final training, and then a year after that final training was concluded. And the results were this. And I'm not going through all the details of the study. I'm just the highlights. And their conclusion was, and I'll read it to you, that the results demonstrated that multimodal simultaneous cognitive physical training programs have the potential to boost particular executive functions, including shifting of memory and working memory, in healthy older adults compared to exclusively physical training. Okay? They also said it was important to note that the performance levels in the executive functions and long-term visual memory and episodic memory and processing speed, those advances that they made from this training were all maintained a year later. Okay, so what does that mean? Basically, what that means is that this training helped many people with various forms of cognitive function that are vital to everyday behavior and performance, and that those gains that they realized were maintained a year after that training had concluded. So the benefits stuck. Now I'll go back to their words, the conclusion. Those were the results. Their conclusion was that particular executive functions benefit from simultaneous cognitive physical training compared to exclusively physical training. They also said that cognitive physical training programs may counteract widespread cognitive impairment in the elderly. That's powerful. That they're saying that this combined training may actually counteract widespread cognitive impairment in elderly. That is a really powerful statement. And this is as I said, a peer-reviewed study that you can found at NIH. The second article that I'm going to reference here was just recent. It came out in December of this year, December of 2017, a couple of months ago, and was conducted at UCLA. All right, so now the method for this one was done on 55-year-old adults, 55 older adults between the ages of 60 and 75 with subjective memory impairment. So they did have some subjective memory impairment, all right? They trained for 90 minutes in small group classes twice a week, all right? Now they did it for 4 weeks, and then they were broken into 2 groups for this training. One group did memory training done simultaneously while on a stationary bike, and then the second group just did the stationary bike and then did memory training, all right? So one group did the stationary bike training and then did some cognitive training for memory. The second group did the memory training at the same time they were riding the bike, all right? Now the results showed that the simultaneous group, the group that did the training at the same time, but not the other group, not the sequential group, only the group that did the training at the same time realized the following benefits. They increased their composite memory. They had some significant transfer to non-trained reasoning abilities. Now, this is a very important point I'll come back to. And then they also had increases in complex attention. All right, so why is that important? Okay, so this group that did the simultaneous training realized benefits in composite memory, the overall different forms of memory, and in complex attention, all right? But they also showed that they realized enhancements in transfer in non-trained reasoning abilities. So transfer is a very important aspect to getting some results. In other words, when people train in a certain thing, if you do an assessment and that assessment gauges how well you do at something, and then you reassess and you're doing better at that same type of activity, the question becomes, well, are you just getting better at the training? But what they tested for was transfer to real life abilities. So they tested the people's ability to do things that were not being trained, and they found enhancements in there as well. So that's very, very powerful evidence there. Now, their conclusion, in their words, those were the results. Their conclusion is that the findings indicate that a 4-week simultaneous memory training and aerobic exercise program is sufficient to improve memory, attention, and reasoning abilities in older adults. Really, really powerful. Okay, so since we at the Braining Center, that's kind of the backbone, one of the backbones of our entire program is that, that we do this cognitive and physical training at the same time. And we've always stated that there are numerous benefits for that. My takeaway from this and many other studies that have been done out there are that this shows the benefits of simultaneous training. To us, it really just makes sense, right? There are 3 things that we've always kind of thought and believed, and that the evidence kind of shows, although it's difficult to show direct correlation to some of these takeaways, but we think it's fairly obvious for 3 reasons. One is that your brain and body are tied together. We know that. We know that they are literally linked physically and biologically tied together. So when you move your body, you activate various neural connections, and you also release various vital neurochemicals, right? Basically, your brain comes alive when you start to move your body and exercise. So it only makes sense that at that peak point of activity that you're going to be able to improve cognitive abilities at the same time, right? So the second takeaway that we have here at the Braining Center that these studies support is that what you're doing when you're doing cognitive and physical training simultaneously is you're really emulating real life, right? So when you're training, not real life, you don't actually go out and do something physical without having to think at the same time, usually. And you don't usually sit and just do something cognitively without having to engage your body. You do that sometimes, but not all the time, and oftentimes not. Many times you're challenged to be doing something physically, to be getting your heart rate up, to be under some kind of stress or duress, while you have to maintain cognitive function and usually many times have to be at your cognitive peak, right? So it only makes sense that doing the training, physical and cognitive training simultaneously, is going to help you to cope with real life. And so that's another takeaway that we have. One of the things that we do at the Braining Center, and one of the things we think, reasons why we think these studies really support the training that we're doing. The last takeaway that we have goes back to the concept of neuroplasticity. The basis of really cognitive enhancement is neuroplasticity. There's two primary components to neuroplasticity. One is data, getting data into the brain, right? So if you want to leverage change in your brain, you have to get the data in there, whether it's through your eyes, your ears, your proprioceptive system, right? And the second is making sure that your subconscious brain understands that the data coming in, that what you're trying to do is important, because it's getting all kinds of data all the time, and it can't prioritize all of it, right? So it needs to know that the data coming in is priority, that what you're challenging the subconscious to do at that moment is really important, right? So that concept of priority, we feel, is relevant to these findings. And the reason is because many times you don't usually train. You may do something physically and cognitively at the same time, but you don't usually train to do something physically and cognitively at the same time. You're not usually doing something aerobically and then doing cognitive challenges at the same time. So when we do this, when we're doing this deliberate cognitive physical training simultaneously, it's kind of like your brain perks up. Because it's not something you do all the time, it realizes this is something that's unique and that you're deliberately doing it, and therefore it must be important. And that in itself creates that priority in the subconscious. This is our feeling here at the Braining Center. We feel that is supported by the evidence that's coming out much more rapidly and much more profoundly as time is moving forward. So those are three of the takeaways that we have, that we feel that are kind of supported by all the data and all the research that's going on to date. In conclusion, what I would say is you need to really think while you exercise, and you need to move your body while you think. If you really want to activate your brain and realize optimal outcomes, brain and body outcomes, challenge yourself in both ways. Those are guiding principles, as I said, here at the Braining Center, and they're things that we feel are key to success, to optimizing your human performance, optimizing your brain, and optimizing your body. So that is the topic of the week. I hope that was helpful for everybody. And if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to visit our website or to email me at mike@headstrong1.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks a lot, and have an awesome rest of your week.